Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Leviticus chapter 3 in a clear and simple way, step by step.
Right out of the gate, we're looking at a truly fascinating ancient procedural manual. This isn't just some dry history lesson. It's a meticulous, structured, step-by-step guide detailing exactly how the ancient Israelites interacted with God through the sanctuary. The level of detail we're about to see is just incredible because it really shows us that approaching the Creator wasn't some casual, everyday affair. It required a very specific, deeply mindful process. Okay, so let's dive into this by defining our core subject for this explainer. This entire third chapter is wholly dedicated to the rules of what is known as the peace offering, or as it's sometimes translated, the fellowship offering. Now, this was a voluntary sacrifice brought from either the herd or the flock. Think of it kind of like a shared celebratory meal. Unlike some other offerings in the text that might be entirely burned up or brought strictly to atone for a specific sin, the fellowship offering was actually shared. It was shared between the person bringing it, the priests, and God. So it acted as this powerful, tangible expression of gratitude, well-being, and communal fellowship. Let's start with Section 1, Offerings from the Herd. This covers Leviticus 3, verses 1 through 5. Let's look really closely at verse 1. So unlike some other offerings in Leviticus, which strictly required a male animal, a peace offering from the herd can actually be either male or female. But, and this is a massive caveat, it absolutely must be without defect, or as the text says, without blemish. You couldn't just bring a sick, injured, or lame animal from the back of your barn. No way. You had to present an animal in perfect physical condition before the Lord. Moving right along into verse 2, the text breaks down into 4 very clear procedural steps. First, the offerer presents the animal at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Second, they lay their hand upon the animal's head. Now, this isn't just a light touch, it's a crucial physical act. The offerer is literally leaning their weight onto the animal to show absolute personal ownership and connection. Third, the offerer slaughters the animal right there. And fourth, Aaron's sons, the priests, step in to handle the blood, dashing or sprinkling it against the altar on all sides. As you can see, it's a very active, hands-on process for the person bringing the offering. Next, in verses 3 and 4, the text gets extremely specific about anatomy. This illustrates exactly which parts of the animal are dedicated strictly to the altar. The text mentions the fat that covers the inner parts, the 2 kidneys and the fat on them near the loins, and an archaic term, the lobe or covering above the liver, which is removed along with the kidneys. In the ancient world, these suet or hard fat portions along with the kidneys and liver lobe were considered the absolute richest, most highly prized inner parts of the animal. These specific parts are removed so they can be given entirely to the altar. And verse 5 concludes this first section. Aaron's sons, the priests, take these specific, rich, fatty portions we just listed and place them right on top of the burning wood on the altar, actually directly on top of the daily burnt offering. The text describes this as an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord, which essentially means it creates a pleasing aroma. And that completes the herd offering process. The person has done their part, the priests have done theirs, and God receives the richest parts, burned in the fire, firmly establishing that peaceful fellowship. All right, moving to Section 2, Lambs from the Flock. Specifically, we'll look at verses 6 through 11. Let's cover verses 6, 7, and 8. These verses highlight the exact same initial sequence we just saw with the cattle. If the offering is a lamb, it can again be male or female, but it absolutely must be flawless. The person brings it to the front of the tent of meeting, lays their hand on its head to claim that vital personal connection, slaughters it, and then the priests take over to dash the blood around the altar. The text intentionally repeats these steps. Why? So there is absolutely zero ambiguity about how the process begins. Now, take a look at the comparison here between the herd and the lamb. In verse 9, the anatomical instructions for the lamb require one highly unique addition that you just don't find in the instructions for the cattle offering. Let's look at verses 9 and 10 to see what that specific addition is. Along with the inner fat, the kidneys, and the lobe of the liver that we saw before, the lamb offering includes the entire fat tail, cut off close to the backbone. Now, I know that might sound a bit strange to us today, but Middle Eastern sheep of this era had uniquely large, heavy, fatty tails. It was considered a tremendous delicacy, a truly highly prized part of the animal. Because the overarching rule of the peace offering is that the richest, absolute best parts go to God, this entire fat tail is specifically dedicated to the fire alongside those other inner parts. Verse 11 clarifies this beautifully. The text plainly states that the priest shall burn these parts on the altar as food or an offering made by fire unto the Lord. The use of the word food here is really striking. It symbolizes God's accepted portion of this fellowship meal. Remember, the offerer and the priests will eventually eat the remaining meat of the peace offering, but God's portion, the absolute richest fat and the fat tail, is consumed by the fire first. On to section 3, goats from the flock. This brings us to Leviticus 3, verses 12 through 16. Let's walk right through verses 12 and 13. Notice the procedural consistency here. The text repeats the exact same 4 steps again. Present the goat, lay your hand on its head, slaughter it before the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron dash the blood against the altar on all sides. You might be wondering, why all this repetition? Well, because this is a precise legal and ritual manual. The text repeats these steps over and over to ensure there is no confusion whatsoever about the correct procedure, no matter which of the 3 animals you happen to bring. Verses 14 and 15 detail the goat's altar portion. The goat's anatomy offered to the fire is exactly identical to the herd animal from the very beginning of the chapter. We see the inner fat, the kidneys, and the lobe above the liver. It notably omits the fat tail, of course, because that specific anatomical feature is unique to the lamb we just discussed. Verse 16 summarizes the goat offering. The priest burns them on the altar for a sweet savor, a pleasing aroma. But then it ends with this profound blanket statement that really echoes backward through the entire chapter. All the fat is the Lord's. This cements the principle that all the diverted, richest, hard fat portions we've been discussing belong strictly to God and are absolutely not for human consumption in these sacrifices.
Section 4, the perpetual statute. This is the final rule of the chapter. Let's detail verse 17 because it is a monumental rule. It says, "It shall be a perpetual statute throughout your generations in all your dwellings that ye shall eat neither fat nor blood." I really want to emphasize that this is a strict, forever law for the Israelites. Whether they are wandering out in the wilderness or living in houses in the land of Israel centuries later, they must never, ever consume the suet, that specific hard fat dedicated to the altar, nor the blood. It's a permanent boundary. Section 5, key ideas and explanations. Let's look at the simple peshat, the clear, literal meaning. So, what is the simple why behind the how? First, the requirement to bring an animal without blemish means bringing your absolute best to God. You just don't offer your leftovers. Second, the physical act of laying hands signifies personal ownership. It means this offering truly represents you and your intentions. Third, as we saw with the fat and a lamb's tail, the absolute richest parts belong to the Creator as a sign of ultimate respect. And finally, the blood is strictly forbidden because blood represents life, and life belongs to God alone. This offering is a mechanism to acknowledge these deep fundamental truths. Section 6, Practical Life Lessons. What are the eternal principles we can take from this? Here is exactly how we can improve ourselves based on this ancient chapter. First, give your best. Just like the unblemished animal, never offer flawed, half-hearted efforts in your work, your relationships, or your spiritual life. Second, seek fellowship. The peace offering was, at its absolute core, a shared meal. We should take deliberate, active steps to create peace and community around us. And third, respect boundaries. Just as the blood and the fat were distinctly reserved and set apart, we must recognize and honor the sacred limits and boundaries in our own lives. Let's do a quick recap of the whole chapter. In Leviticus 3, we covered the step-by-step instructions for the peace or fellowship offering. We looked at offerings from the herd, then the lamb, and then the goat. We saw the repetitive but absolutely vital sequence, presenting an unblemished animal, laying hands upon it to claim ownership, slaughtering it, and the priests dashing the blood. We learned that the absolute best, richest parts are burned on the altar as God's portion, and it all culminated in that eternal, permanent law against eating fat and blood. So the ultimate takeaway from Leviticus 3 is that approaching the divine requires our best, our ownership, and our profound respect for boundaries. Ask yourself, in your own daily pursuits, are you bringing your absolute best, or just what happens to be left over? Thank you for learning with us. If this helps you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.